1967 was the year I was born. And from as far back as I can remember, I had always lived on Echo Place in the Bronx. And so the pivotal year for me really was around 1975, as I'm starting to see what I would learn later was Bboying. And I know that because of pictures that I have from my school pictures. And I can remember friends in those pictures. And I remember some of them friends doing something when they were going to the ground and you know, the term was breaking. So, you know, time goes on and around, I think it was around 1976, 77, I start to see MCs rapping. You know, I didn't know it was called rapping. We used to call it MCing on my block. And there was a lot of Spanish dudes that were doing it. And I was like, whoa, okay. Now I know that because I remember I would go to Fordham Road to the lowest Paradise, and I would go see Saturday Night Fever. So I kind of recollect that was during that time that I was really, you know, checking out the scene and seeing what was happening. So like between those years, it was like breaking and MCing on my block. The block was heavily infested with gangs, right? A lot of outlaw gangs. I can't tell you I remember the names of those gangs off the top of my head, but I knew my block was heavily populated by the gangs. So about 1979, my mom decides, because my brother had already moved out, he was living deep in the South Bronx, he was on Daly Avenue, and he moved to this place called Rochester. And my mom, he invited my mom to come check it out. So we went on a couple of visits. Eventually, 79, my mother said, yes, let's go. So she sent me first. I remember going, and I remember my mom, you know, again, my block was pretty diverse, Echo Place. And there was a family of DJs that used to play out. They used to bring their stuff out. They were playing disco. Some people were playing the breaks. And what I remember were a lot of the Puerto Ricans were playing the breaks. Okay, so but what they were really doing was needle dropping, if I'm honest with you. And so I moved to Rochester. My mother finally comes. I'm living with my brother. My mother finally comes and she gives me a cassette. And she says, you know, so-and-so made this cassette for you. Because they all knew I was into the street, you know, rapping and what was known as MCing. I was into that. So I remember putting the cassette on and, you know, he made me a special tape. And one of the first things I remember hearing was Rapper's Delight. It had just come out. And like he put, because he knew, they all knew I was into the MCing stuff. So I was like, whoa, what is this? And so I had a copy of Rapper's Delight from my man in the Bronx who made the cassette for me. I wish I still had that today. I don't, but I wish I did. So anyway, as we keep on going, I'm in school, and I remember being in school and hearing somebody they brought in this record, and it had a blue label with a rainbow on it. I eventually would know that would be, you know, Sugar Hill Records. And so they start playing Rapper's Delight. So I'm living in Rochester. I really didn't like it. You know, it was kind of slow compared to New York, but you know, I'm living there, and we kept going back and forth to the city all the time because of our family. Every, you know, kind of holiday, we would go back to the city. So in 1983, my mom was like, you want to go back for the summer? So I went with my sister. I went, in 1983, my sister is living on Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. Sedgwick and Kingsbridge, that area, right? Around Walton High School, University. So I'm there with my, you know, I'm living there, and I'm going to hang out. I used to hang out on Valentine Avenue. And we would always make our way to Poe Park. So I'm there for the first time, really living back in the Bronx, after living in Rochester. And so now I'm seeing hip hop fashion. I'm seeing everything just start, now the MCs are out. Now it's really like hip hop is flourishing. But I was only there for the summer, so I was buying gear, bringing it back. I went back to school in Rochester. And then every summer, 84, went back for the summer. And 85, we made a decision that I was going to go back to live in New York, live with my sister, go to school. And we made that happen. So I went back. And I just started getting into stuff. I started getting into the streets heavier and heavier. And I ended up getting into a situation where I sold drugs to an undercover officer. And so my sister was like, if this is why you came here, we can't have it. So I asked my aunt, who lived in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. She lived in the Smith Projects, Chinatown area, the South Street Seaport. So I moved with her, and I continued to get into trouble. I continued to do my thing. Eventually, my aunt, my sister teamed up, and they were like, you got to go back. So they brought me back. They put me on a plane. They got on the plane with me, brought me back to Rochester. And then around 1986-ish, I ended up leaving the Rock, and I end up in this place called Providence, Rhode Island. And again, this is about maybe 3 hours or so from New York City. It's about an hour or so, 40 minutes from Boston. So it's, it's a small state, but it's close to everything. And so in Rhode Island, I'm trying to get my hip hop game on. And I was MCing at the time. So I had done pretty much all of the elements. I was a B-boy. I was a graph writer, and now I'm an MC. I'm MCing in Rhode Island and Providence. And, I was getting a name for myself, and I was trying to make it. I was shopping my records, my demos to Wild Pitch Records with Stu Fine, who was the owner at that time. But nothing panned out. But I can remember one thing about my life that was pretty significant, was that I was always an anxious kid. I was always anxious. I always had anxiety. And so I would always use the get high, the drugs, to really sort of curb that, to put the Band-Aid on the anxiety, right? And so that might have been some childhood stuff, but I was always an anxious kid. So in Providence, at a certain point, I stopped getting high. I stopped doing everything, right? And I didn't have the Band-Aid to really curb the anxiety. So now I'm having to deal with all these feelings that are rushing in on me. And so I can remember laying up at night in bed and just crying for no reason. Didn't know why I was crying. But I would always call my mom and connect with my mom. Now, my mom was a Christian. My mom was going down, when we moved to Rochester, she got saved and she started forcing me to go to church. But by that time, I was already starting to hit the streets. In Providence, I'm calling my mom because I'm just not right. Something's wrong. And she would always tell me, Derrick, God has a calling on your life. God has something for you to do. You need to stop running from God. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear about God. I don't believe the Bible is God's word. I don't believe any of that. Stop talking to me about that. And she would just pray for me. She left me alone and she would just pray for me. And there were times again where I'm in bed crying and I don't know why I'm crying. And I remember one time we already had our daughter, and my girlfriend, who I was living with, who is now my wife, was out clubbing one night. And I'm at the crib with my daughter, and I'm cleaning the house. And I remember just turning the TV, and there was a preacher on. Now, again, any other time I would have been like, I keep going. But this guy there was something about him that grabbed my attention, and he was telling his personal story. And in his personal story, he talked about where one time God had spoken to him, and God spoke to him and said, trust me, I have everything under control. And when he said those words, something in me, it resonated, because I had never really gotten to the point where I could trust people, and I definitely didn't trust God, and I was confused about what was happening in my life. And now God speaks to me through this through this guy. And I remember, now again, I'm not really a Christian. But I remember it was like the end of the message and I wanted to see the whole message. And so I remember praying a prayer. Now, again, I'm not there yet, right? But I'm praying. I said, God, I want to see this message again. Please let it re-air. About 2 weeks later, I'm in my crib again, cleaning my crib, and I'm turning the channels, and I see the guy sitting next to another preacher on a platform. And I said, that looks like the same place. So I turned up the volume and they were introducing him. It was actually the same message. So I got not a cassette, I got a VCR tape. How many remember the VCRs? I got a VCR tape, I popped it in and I recorded it. And I remember that day, I knelt down in my house, in the room, and I said, Jesus, I don't know what you could do with me. I'm kind of a real mess, but I need peace in my life. I need some peace, and this guy's story really resonated with me. Can you help me? And I remember just praying a simple prayer like that. If you'll help me, I'll live for you. The next day, I opened up the yellow pages. Oh, you see how far back that goes. And I was looking for a church. Now, I knew my mother was going to a church called the Assemblies of God in Rochester. So I said, let me find an Assemblies of God church. So I'm looking and I found a church like right up the street from my house where I was living in Providence. And I called the number. The pastor picked up. I said, I'm looking for a church. He said, you can come this Sunday. We'll be waiting for you. That became our family for 9 long years. We were at that church, and God did some incredible things. Now, remember, I'm still hip hop. So I started writing Christ-centered raps. I started writing Christian rhymes, holy hip hop, right? And nobody was really doing it at that time in Providence. That was like an anomaly. It was a weird thing. So I was going to share my testimony and I was going to do a concert. And I remember doing that, and it was for the youth group of the church. And, and I continued to do those kind of things for years and years and years, and really had a heart to reach out to the hip hop culture and the hip hop community and let them know that, there's a greater plan for your life, that Jesus was more than just a great historical figure. He was somebody that could change your life. And I started to sort of share that with people. But that's my story, man. Coming from the Bronx, going to Providence, and then, eventually I would go to Bible school, and then, eventually I would go to seminary, and then eventually I would get my doctorate in education and begin to teach and really use the educational process to be able to share my life story with others about the beauty. About the beauty of Jesus, about the beauty of the gospel, about the beauty of God. And I never thought in a million years that I would really serve God in this way. I began serving God in 1991. That's a long time. And so, I've been doing this for a while. And, my message is pretty simple, right? We look for things to sort of fill holes in our life. We look for things. For me, it was hip hop. It was the streets. It was getting high. It was everything that came along with hip hop. And I'm not saying that everything in hip hop is negative, because there's some positive things going on in hip hop. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying the streets. Hip hop is really the streets, and we look for things to sort of fill in the holes and fill in the gaps. And I found no greater than the Lord Jesus. I found no greater than finding purpose in my life, finding a reason to live, finding a reason to do what I do. And it's just been a great journey as I search the scriptures, as I look at the Bible, as I look at the story of the scriptures. It is an amazing tale of love. It's an amazing tale of redemption. It's an amazing tale of taking people that were on the bottom of the ladder. They were under the gutter, and how you could take those people and how Jesus hung with those people. He didn't just go preach to them. He hung with them. He lived with them. He was about that life, but he had a message of hope for them. And that's what I want to share with you. Like, put your trust in Jesus. Now, I know a lot of people in hip hop, they have reservations about the Bible. I had the same. The Bible is the white man's book. The Bible was written by man. You can't trust. I said all those same things. For years, I was arguing and fighting and debating, and I didn't believe the Bible. But when I had an encounter with the creator of the universe, that's when the Bible started to come alive for me. And I want to challenge you that if he could do that for me, he could do that for you. I hope my story inspired you to know that there is hope, but that hope can only be found in the Creator who came in the person of Jesus Christ.